Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I hope you're all having a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you're based around the globe. We'll give it another 30 seconds before we get started. Okay. So hello and welcome to our live webinar, Harness Data for Water Resource Management. My name is Thalia Coots and I'm a Customer Success Manager here at Aquatic Informatics. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I'm really encouraged to see so many of our Aquarius customers and our non-customers from all around the world joining us today. It's great to have you with us. I'd like to introduce our wonderful speaker for today, Susan Wells, who is the team leader for environmental monitoring data at Otago Regional Council in New Zealand. In Australia, we actually refer to New Zealand as being across the ditch. Susan will be sharing with us today how centralizing data using our Aquarius software led to faster analysis to better protect the region's citizens and water systems. Aquatic Informatics is a mission-driven software company founded back in 2003, now serving over 1,600 customers across 60 countries worldwide, including the USGS and Water Survey Canada. Aquatic Informatics provides software solutions for organisations including utilities, municipalities and government agencies that really help to improve water data integrity and streamline regulatory compliance. Aquarius is our analytics software for the natural environment and is fair to say is Otago Regional Council's single source of truth, along with many of our Aquarius customers worldwide. Aquarius is designed to empower organisations to make accurate and trusted data-driven decisions while protecting human health and reducing the impact on our environment. After all, our mission here at Aquatic Informatics is to protect life with timely water information. Besides Aquarius, as you can see, we have many other software applications under our Aquatic Informatics belt, including WIMS and Rio, which is our compliance and operational data management software. We have also introduced HydroCorrect into our portfolio, which Otago Regional Council are currently trialling, and Susan will talk a little bit more about that during the webinar. For those that aren't aware, HydroCorrect automates the QA and QC process of data by detecting data anomalies using automated alerts and corrections. So without any further ado, I'm going to now hand the microphone over to Susan to share ORC's journey with our Aquarius software.
Awesome. Thanks, Thalia. And thanks everyone for joining. I see a couple of familiar names on the list there. I'm just going to start out quickly by giving a brief introduction to Otago and the role of the Otago Regional Council, for those of you who aren't familiar with the area. So Otago's region in New Zealand, located near the bottom of the South Island. So we span from the Southern Alps in the west all the way through to the east coast. It covers a fairly diverse range of environments. It's the third largest region in New Zealand by area size. And so we've got some alpine areas, we've got some fairly sizable lakes, we've got the largest river in the country by volume. And then, yeah, spanning through to the coast, we've got some stunning beaches and things as well. And also one of the driest areas in the country too, so central Otago. So we have some fairly different rainfall amounts throughout the region. It can be highly variable across the region. So we see some heavier rainfalls towards the west in the headwater areas, in the alpine areas. And then we can have some of the driest areas in the country as you get through central Otago and towards the east coast. So highly variable region. So despite having some quite large water volumes in the region, many areas in Otago can be quite short on water in the summertime as well. And we have a fair bit of agriculture going on in the region, so irrigation can be quite important for us. We also have a fair bit of tourism in the region, so places like Queenstown and Wanaka. We see a lot of domestic and international tourists come through here for the scenery and also for some adventure activities and skiing and things like that. We've got some wineries and things as well that attract people to the region. And then over on the coast, we've got Dunedin as the biggest city in the region. And we've got a peninsula in Dunedin that hosts a lot of wildlife, including like penguins, albatross, seals, things like that. So in terms of the Otago Regional Council, the Regional Council is responsible for sustainably managing Otago's natural resources, so including land, air, water, on behalf of the Otago community. So we do this by setting policies and rules to protect Otago's resources. We also do it by monitoring the environment so that we can use that data to inform decision making, both within council and information being passed out to the public. We regulate activities that may have an impact on our environment by issuing resource consents. And we have a flood warning function as well, and yes, civil defence and emergency management function. So what data does ORC store? So we have two teams within the Regional Council that are collecting and storing environmental data. So one of those is the environmental monitoring team. They are responsible for maintaining about 350 or so currently active environmental monitoring sites. So these sites we're measuring water quantity, so groundwater, rivers, lakes, flows, levels, rainfall amounts, river, lake and groundwater quality as well, and then air quality, some soil monitoring and some biomonitoring and ecology data as well. And then our other data team within council is our regulatory data team, who manages the data being fed in by consent holders. So they're responsible for managing the data from around 3,200 or so consents. The number of sites and data sets that we're managing has been increasing over time. So that top graph on the slide just shows the number of data sets that the environmental monitoring team has been responsible for over time. So you can see it's been sort of drastically increasing over the years. And some of our data sets span many decades as well. So it's really important that we have a robust and reliable data management system so that this data can be used and accessed easily within council and can also be fed out to the public. So that's driven our need to move to a robust council-wide data management system. So our previous system was reaching sort of the end of its life. Things were becoming a bit less reliable within the system. We had issues with it crashing or data sets disappearing. And yeah, so we needed to move to a much more future-proofed, robust system. So we chose to move to Aquarius so that we could store all of our environmental monitoring and compliance data in one place. We could replace that dated infrastructure with something that we could keep better maintained, and it allows us to have one source of truth for the data. And then we have a responsibility to make some of that environmental monitoring data publicly available, so we needed to be able to retain that ability as well. So I'll just talk a wee bit about ORC's use case with Aquarius. We migrated all of our data to Aquarius in 2021. We were running both databases for a wee while there, but we've entirely moved over to Aquarius systems now. So we use Aquarius time series for our data storage, review, and correction. We use Aquarius samples for our discrete data, so that's mostly our water quality sampling data, as well as some biomonitoring and ecology data. And then we also use the Aquarius web portal platform for publishing our data, both externally to the public and internally to other teams within Council as well. So I mentioned before that we have the two teams within Council that use data that we're storing. So data is maintained within the system by our environmental monitoring and our regulatory data teams. In our old database, we used to be able to keep the data fairly separate. It was a fairly files-based system for storing data. So we didn't tend to overlap a lot between those two teams. With the move to Aquarius and having everything in one place and just having that one source of truth, we worked out fairly quickly that we had to have a bit more coordination between the two different data teams. So any setting changes, particularly within the Aquarius web portal, they were going to impact both the teams. So yeah, we needed a lot more coordination there, but that's actually been quite a benefit for the teams. They're both fairly small teams. There's only 4 people in each of those data teams managing those various data sets. So it means we can rely on people in the other teams a bit more for backing up our knowledge and things, and sort of leaning on each other and sharing expertise, which has been a pretty awesome improvement. And then the data, both the regulatory data and the environmental monitoring data, is also frequently accessed by other teams within Council. So we have scientists using the data for reporting. It gets fed into plans and policies and kind of underpins quite a lot of functions within Council. So I'm going to talk mostly about our use of the Aquarius web portal, because I think that's where we've made the most gains by using Aquarius compared to what we used to be able to do. But I will just touch fairly briefly on our use of Aquarius time series as well. I will skip over Aquarius samples, but if anyone has any questions about that or wants to know anything, I'm happy to reach out separately about that. So Aquarius time series, as I've kind of said, we used to have a fairly files-based data management system. So we had lots of different copies of data sets, and depending on what file you were looking at, you could see a different series of sites and data sets, or you could see some different data as well, depending on where edits had been made and what files they were copied through to. So I wanted to be able to avoid that in Aquarius. We really wanted the data to just be really available as one source of truth. So you could look at everything in one place, and you knew that you could rely on the data that you were looking at, that it was correct. So we use Aquarius time series for that. Our data that goes into Aquarius samples, we also transfer that out into Aquarius time series so that it's maintained alongside all of our continuous monitoring data, so get everything in one place. Aquarius time series is great for the fact that it maintains a raw record of the data alongside any edits and corrections that have been made to the data set. So in our old system, we used to have to manually make note of any corrections and edits that were being applied to any time series data. So we just maintained a spreadsheet for keeping tabs on that, whereas Aquarius time series has that edit history function. So you can pull up a time series, you can pull up the edit history, and you can see anything that's ever been done to the data. It makes it really easy for seeing who's done any edits, when they were applied, what was done to them, and you can make corrections to the edits as well if necessary. And it's also really easy to roll back to the raw data, delete any edits out if need be as well. So moving on to our use of the Aquarius web portal. As I said, it's sort of where we've had the biggest gains, I think, both internally and what we're feeding out externally. So publishing our environmental data portal for feeding data out to the public was the last step of our migration to fully using Aquarius. So we launched our environmental data portal to the public in February last year, and we ran it in parallel with our old system up until November last year when we switched off our old website. So firstly, this is what our previous website used to look like, so some screenshots from it. It was fairly static. We posted images of graphs of the last 7 days or the last 6 months. We were only really publishing flow, river level, lake level, and rainfall information to the public. And yeah, they could only access up to the last 6 months of data. They couldn't get actual data points. They could just see those images. And then there was a map function as well, but it mostly just showed where our monitoring sites were within the region. If anything was in a flood warning or low flow alert level, then the dot on the map would change color. But outside of that, you couldn't really gain a lot of information from that map. You had to click through to actually see the graphs for the sites. Getting the data up to the website was running on some fairly dated infrastructure. There was a lot of steps to the process to publish data up to that website as well. So from copying data between the different database files right through to creating the images to then post them to an external website provider, and then them actually finally loading on the website. So this took a wee bit of time. There was a bit of a lag between data updating in our system and feeding out to the website. And then having lots of steps in that process also meant that things could fall over at any point in time. So in my time looking after the old system, sort of every step in that process did fall over at one point or another, and would quite often happen Friday afternoons. So there tended to be a lot of phone calls to our IT team to get them to help us get things back up and running so that we were able to maintain those feeds out to the public. So yeah, we needed a more reliable system for publishing data to the public, and that's where Aquarius Web Portal came in. Web Portal gave us a lot more opportunities for how we could display our data to the public, and what we could display to the public as well. But then we had to sort of step back and think about, well, there's a lot of things that we can do, but what should we be doing? We knew from the previous website that we had a range of different users wanting to access the data, so ranging from farmers and irrigators using the old site to check what flows were doing on rivers close to their properties, to check that they were complying with their water take consent conditions, particularly over summer if anything was getting close to minimum flow levels where they'd have to stop taking water. Then we knew that people were going to sites quite frequently and just going to one page and refreshing that to see what the latest data point was doing, and using it on the fly to make decisions. We also knew that the old website was heavily used in flood or heavy rain events. So we'd seen views skyrocket during heavy rain events. So we needed to make sure that the data was going to be easily available for people in those events. We tended to get a lot of new users in those events as well that weren't on it frequently. So they needed to be able to get to the information they wanted to see quite quickly. so that they could use that for making decisions around, if they lived alongside a river, whether they needed to potentially move stock or belongings, or planning for whether there might be road closures and things, or if their homes or businesses might be at risk of flooding. We also use the website internally within our engineering and flood duty teams to monitor flood situations as well as other internal tools. And then we knew that we had recreational users using the data as well to make decisions about, whether they could go fishing or tramping or cross rivers and things, and for boating as well on the lakes. And then in Central Otago, where we have a fair bit of tourism operations, so we had jet boat operators and helicopter pilots and things using the data as well. And then finally, we also have researchers and consultants accessing the data for various different purposes. So probably a fairly wide range of people using the data, and quite a number of people that want to just have one site that they'd go to and be able to refresh that over and over, and weren't very interested in having lots of additional bells and whistles added to the website. They just wanted to be able to go to one place and see that piece of information. And then to the other end of the scale, the researchers and consultants that wanted to be able to access a lot more data than we had previously been able to publish as well. So fairly conflicting expectations of what the new data portal should do. So we wanted to be able to add a lot of extra functionality, but also retain the ease of use that the old system had. So we worked closely with Aquatic Informatics to come up with the best approach. And we landed on using location dashboards for basically creating a one-to-one replacement of what the old system looked like. So this could be used by the users that just want to access that one site and be able to refresh that frequently. So on these dashboards, we now have graphs for the last 7 days, 30 days, and 180 days for our flow sites and rainfall information. And we can add context into these dashboards as well. So we can, add tables of alert levels for the sites. So if there's any flood warning levels or minimum flow levels, we can have a table of those. And also some lines on the charts for each of those levels as well. So it's really easy for people to tell if, say, the river level is approaching, say, minimum flow. You can see whether it's gone below that or not yet. And then some added functionality compared to the old website. So the use of the map tool has been really useful for us. There's a lot more information that we can provide on the maps now than what we had on the previous website. So the new maps allow us to see what's going on in the region much more at a glance. We're able to publish the latest data points for each parameter on a map and provide context with the legends. So this example is the latest flow across the region. And then that inset image is what it would look like on the old system. So nothing's in flood warning alert levels or low flow alert levels. So it wasn't showing up with any colored dots on the old system, but the new system, you can actually see that. So those orange and dark blue dots, the flows are higher and above median along the eastern part of the region. But then throughout Central Otago and up to the headwaters, those lighter blue dots, flows are still mostly below median through there. So it gives a much better picture of what's going on across the whole region. And from here, people can click through to the location data as well. Another parameter that's really useful having that region-wide glance is rainfall. So here we're showing the 24-hour accumulation of rainfall across the region, and from this you can see that the headwater sites on the sort of western border of our region had a bit of rain, but not a lot of that was really spilling over into the rest of the region, so things were still quite dry through Central Otago and towards the coast. So this is really useful for tracking weather events as they're coming through the region. You can see if it's sort of moving through the region or whether there's any kind of hotspots for rainfall amounts sort of exceeding any alert thresholds, and using that with the flow map, you can see if there's particular areas that are at risk for flooding or anything. We can also look at sort of up to the last 7 days and last 30 days of rainfall. So that last 30 days has been a recent addition to the map, and that was just based on feedback that we had from the public recently, that after having quite a dry summer and autumn, it was useful for farmers to be able to see how much rain had actually fallen over the last month, which was not a lot in some cases. Another massive benefit to the new data portal is that we're able to publish a lot more parameters than we had previously. So our goal is to publish all of the parameters that the environmental monitoring team are collecting. We're not quite there yet. We're still making progress on it, but we've been able to publish some water quality parameters that we hadn't previously made easily publicly available. This data was always available if people wanted to request it from us, but we didn't display it anywhere. So we wanted to still maintain the ease of use and easy understandability for the public, while adding a lot more parameters. So we came up with the idea of creating this parameter menu dashboard. And here we just give a list of the parameters that we're displaying currently on the data portal, and then a little bit of information about the parameter and why we're monitoring it. And then from there, we have a link that people can follow to go through to the map for that parameter, and that loads it up with the relevant information on the map, so the right legends and things. And from there, people can click into sites and go and view the whole data sets as well. So that leads to another massive improvement with the data portal compared to our old system, is that we have entire data sets published for our sites and for the parameters that we're publishing. So some of our data sets go back to sort of the 50s and 60s, and we have all of that data available for people to view now. And then anything that's gone through our full quality assurance process internally, we make that available for the public to download it if they want to as well. Previously, if people wanted to be able to see anything more than the last 6 months of data, they had to contact us, and we would export it from our system and send it to them, or if they wanted any actual data points, rather than just being able to see those chart images. Whereas now, a lot more of that data is readily available for people to go and look at themselves and download themselves as well. So just very broadly, the team used to have to spend a fair bit of time responding to data requests, but since publishing the data portal, that's pretty drastically decreased. So just a rough count of the number of data requests that came through in the second half of 2022, there was about 82 data requests, and then in that same period in 2023, once we'd released the new data portal, we'd basically halved the number of data requests coming in, because people were able to access that data themselves instead. And we're hoping that that's going to continue to decrease as well as people get more and more familiar with the data portal, and as we publish more and more parameters to it as well. So now I want to talk about how we use the data portal internally. And sort of our biggest example of this is our consents dashboards. So this is all done by our regulatory data team, but they're using the web portal dashboards to bring together all the relevant data for a consent into one place. So that includes data that the consent holder is sending in, as well as data from our environmental monitoring sites, putting that all in one place, whereas they used to have to previously go to multiple places to see it. And they're able to create a standard view of the data for a consent over the lifetime of the consent. So the stuff I've talked about previously that we're publishing to the public is kind of the tip of the iceberg for what we're doing with the web portal and dashboards in particular. So we probably have around 100 or so publicly available dashboards, but we have closer to 1,600, possibly more than that now, dashboards that we use internally, and most of those are these consent dashboards. I'll just give a couple of examples of some of the charts that we've got on dashboards so you can see how pulling all that information into one place is really useful. So this example here is for a water take from one of our rivers. So the blue line is showing the flow from one of our environmental monitoring locations. And then the red dotted line is the limit, so the minimum flow for that site. It has a seasonal limit, so it changes between summer and winter. And basically, if the river level gets below that limit, then people have to stop taking water. And then that black line on the graph is showing when people are taking water or not. So it's the flow rate for this consent holder. So you can see there pretty clearly at a glance that the flow hasn't gone below those minimum flow limits, and people have been allowed to take that water. So it makes it really easy at a glance to see if people are complying with their consent conditions or not. And then another example, so some of the consent conditions can be a bit more complicated and can pull in or require viewing of more data sets at once. And we're also up for different interpretations depending on how people were looking at them. So being able to use these dashboards and create charts that showed all the information in one place minimized the risk of things being interpreted differently. So in this example, it is a data from a wastewater treatment plant discharge data. So their consent conditions allow them to discharge certain amounts at different times. So those two red lines are their discharge limits, depending on whether it's a dry weather or wet weather. The top line being the wet weather, bottom line being dry weather. The blue line at the bottom is the discharge amounts, and then we're also pulling in rainfall data. So from the top, it's inverted daily rainfall amounts from a nearby location. So you can see in their consent condition, they're allowed to discharge different amount or higher amounts if it's been wet. So people can come and glance at this and go, okay, where they've crossed over that dry weather threshold, we can now see that actually there's been rain at those times as well. So it allows for a lot easier interpretation of whether someone's been compliant or not. So just some benefits of using the dashboards and the data portal in general is that, like I said, it can create a standardized view of consent data. These dashboards are actually accessible to the team in the field as well, so they can pull them up wherever they are. And it makes things a lot easier to check if people are being compliant or not. So it also allows for earlier intervention potentially. So rather than reviewing these possibly annually to seeing if someone was complying or not, it's now a lot easier to see sort of that near real-time data and see, in real time whether people are complying or not. So that chart on the slide is just showing the number of water consents that the regulatory data team were able to assess for compliance in each calendar year. So from 2022 onwards, they've been using the dashboards. So you can see that it allows them to get through a lot more consents checks than previously as well, which is awesome. So what's next for us? So I sort of mentioned before that we haven't finished with our development of the data portal yet. There's still a lot more parameters that we want to add to it to be able to publish everything that the environmental monitoring team does. So we're continuing to publish more parameters. We also want to look at ways where we can continue to add extra context to the data on the portal to make it more easily understandable to the public. We know that a lot of our use externally of the data portal is done on mobile devices, so we want to look at ways that we can improve the mobile usability for the data portal. And as Thalia mentioned at the start, so we're still working pretty closely with Aquatic Informatics, and we're about to start a trial of their new HydroCorrect tool. So that's it for me about how we're using the Aquarius systems, mostly about the web portal side of things. If you're interested in checking out the environmental data portal, you can follow that QR code or go to envdata.orc.govt.nz, and you can see what we're making publicly available. That's it for me. I'll hand it back to Thalia now to wrap up.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Susan. It's really wonderful to see just the innovative ways that you're using the dashboards in particular in Aquarius web portal and taking it to the next level. I really think you've given our audience some great ideas. And if you're interested, there's a little poll that's popped up on the left-hand side. If you'd like to learn more about Aquarius, yeah, please submit your response there in the poll. What we'll do now is we'll have a little bit of a QA session. So if you have any questions, or I can actually see there are a few that have already popped up. So the first one is from Nancy. How far does the Aquarius web portal update? Does it provide the public with data in real time?
Yeah, awesome question. So the data that's coming into time series is kind of constantly updating through the web portal. It takes only a couple of minutes to go from time series through the web portal. For us, our monitoring sites are sending the data in through telemetry generally hourly. So that's kind of what slows down the process of getting the data in and up to date. So we call it near real-time data as opposed to real-time data, because it can be about up to an hour behind sometimes. But as soon as it comes into our system, it's a really quick turnaround for it getting through to time series and then getting out to the public through the web portal.
Thanks, Susan. We have another question from Nathan. How did your team find the training for Aquarius? How quickly were you able to be efficient with the change?
Yeah, cool. So I should have mentioned that we migrated to Aquarius and started a lot of our training just as the COVID pandemic hit. So I think we're meant to get someone over to come do some training with us in person, but we ended up doing it all remotely and online while the whole team was working from home while we were in lockdowns. So we had a lot of training sessions. I can't remember how many, but there was definitely quite a lot, going through all the different aspects of how to use Aquarius and different parts of it. I think these were really useful for the team. We also managed to keep recordings of each of those training sessions so people could refer back to them if necessary. And we were provided with a lot of documentation and things as well that people could refer to. Also, a bit of a shout out to NIWA here, another organisation in New Zealand that uses Aquarius. We lent on them a fair bit for using some of their processes and some of their documentation that they already had. So within the team, I think they were super keen to make that change. And being in lockdown at the time, it allowed for more time to be spent learning the system, less time that the team had to be out in the field because they weren't allowed to be at the time. So I think it was a pretty quick changeover for people to become efficient with it.
Excellent. Thanks, Susan. Another one is, have you considered using Aquarius for flood forecasting?
So we use some flood forecasting tools internally, so it's different teams within council that tend to do that. So I can't really speak on whether they've considered using Aquarius for it or not. But if you want to reach out to me at all, then I can get you in contact with our natural hazards team that deal with our flood forecasting.
And this is something that Brisbane City Council do quite well as well, Tim. Ben, does Aquarius have the capability to accept telemetered data from rainfall gauges, etc., or do you need another software package for that?
So we use a telemetry system that the data feeds into initially. That's just how we do it, but I'm not sure. Thalia, maybe you can answer that one better than I can, whether Aquarius does have that capability to feed telemetry data straight into it through Connect, I assume.
It does go straight through to Connect. Yep. So Ben, happy to chat with you offline about that as well, if you'd like to learn more. John, are you able to load? There's a couple of questions here. So the first one is, are you able to load data from limbs? I'm assuming this is for samples, maybe. And he said, "Nice job, nice job, thumbs up." How have you managed to water quality samples with non-detects, and how are quality assurance data managed?
Yeah, are you able to put in the QA, John, maybe a bit about what LIMS is? I'm not familiar with it, but I can answer some of the second one. So we, I think, use qualifiers for our non-detects. Yeah, the qualifier gets stored with the data if anything's coming through that's below a detection limit. And then quality assurance. So we have the team go through any of our particularly water quality data that comes in. The team will come through and check the results that get sent from the lab are feeding directly into samples, and then they'll check them against the lab PDFs, make sure things match up, and then we can change. There's a reviewed setting that we can change to reviewed to flag if it's been done or not. Cool. Thanks, John. And then in time series for our continuous data, so we have the field team processing their data sets based on their field visits, and then they can, once they're happy with it and they can grade the data, then they can mark that as what we call tech reviewed. They can change the approval level of it. That for us then feeds to the data team, who then comes through and checks over any edits and things that have been made. And then if we're happy with that, we'll change the approval level to approved, and then it's that approved data that's available to the public for anyone that wants to download it. Yeah, so the lab information management system, thanks for clarifying that. So we have some transfers set up. I think we got an external consultant to set up for us some passes and things that take our data that gets sent straight from the lab and it feeds it directly into samples for us. I don't really know the technical ins and outs of how that works, but I'm sure, yeah, that's something that Thalia and the team can probably chat with you about as well. Thanks, Evan.
Nice to see you too, Evan. Okay. Any final questions before we sign off? Okay, we've got another question from Ben. Does Aquarius have the capability to add statistics, e.g. mean annual low flow statistics that can be calculated on the fly?
So we haven't been able to add mouth statistics. That's a suggestion that we've made to Aquatic Informatics, and I think it's come from a couple of other people in New Zealand as well, that would be useful. There are other statistics, so like the way we're displaying flow data on our map, we're calculating the median flows based on the last 5 years of data, and displaying the data based on those levels. So I think there are some statistics that can be created on the fly, but MELF currently isn't one of them.
Okay, and that sounds like it's a feature request. It's an idea.
Yeah.
That's noted as well, Ben, from me, just FYI. And there are 4 upvotes, so it sounds like it's a popular one. All right. Okay, well, I think we're just at about time. I'd like to thank Susan again for a wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for joining today. We've had a great turnout. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Susan, and we really hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you again. Have a
Thanks,
great
everyone.
day or evening. Bye.